Hi, I'm Charlotte Davis. I'm a Tomatis sound therapist in South London. And what I want to talk to you about today is selective mutism. It's a complicated condition, and I think for many people they find it quite disturbing. Not just the child, but the whole family find it very difficult to deal with. So I thought I would talk you through my understanding of it and what you need to do to help the child move on, and also adults who've got trapped in this situation, so they are more difficult. So, what I'm saying to people is you need to be a detective. It's not going to be one thing that's causing the problem, it's going to be a multitude of things, and they all keep the person in a hyper alert state. And because they're hyper alert, their voice box is in that state where you are just so frightened you can't speak. It's really high up, really all the muscles around it are very tense. And we've got to work out why and go through the whole system working out why. So on we go. And it's going to be lots of bits, it's not going to be too tidy. A really important bit to understand is the thing called muscle tension dysphonia. And that is that your muscles in your neck and around your voice box are so tense your voice box can't work properly. So you've got healthy vocal cords, but they're not moving dynamically because the muscles around are too tense. And you can imagine being tense and feeling what that feels like in your throat. It may very well affect your breathing patterns, that is highly likely to, and it also will affect your posture. And that's a two-way thing, I think. That's what we're going to see. That posture is really important for having your voice box in the right place. Breathing is really important. And getting this voice box lower so it's functioning well is also important. So there's lots of bits. Nice bit of research that having a whole altered head position changes how you work with your voice box, changes how you use the muscles in the voice box. And that when you improve someone's posture, their control of their voice box improves. That's quite important to understand. That over time you make the muscles weaker in the voice box if we haven't got good posture. But it's just one bit of it. The next thing I want you to understand is the business of being hyper alert, being, you're really worried, you're really scared. Sound is our first alarm system. When we're born, our sound processing is already myelinated, it's already connected to the brain, it's connected pre-birth. It's the only sense we have in that state. So it triggers off alarm. Our sound is inherently linked to our voice. It's one thing the work of Alfred Tomatis really showed is that when there's a problem with sound, you can hear it in the voice. Problem with the voice, it reflects what's happening with the sound processing. The two work together. Then you've got our alarm system as humans. We've had fantastic development of our brains, but our alarm system is a very old circuit, a very old neural system, which can get stuck in a very hyper alert state because we feel under terrible attack. And then on top of it, we overthink that situation. So we keep ourselves there. So that is a bit of a faulty system. So we can get caught in a hyper alert state. Other animals tend to be able to shake it all off and then go on. You can see it with mice. They shake off trauma and off they go. If they didn't, they'd have seized up every time a cat looked at them. Trauma can turn off our social engagement. So when we're terrified, we close down. We close down not just our sound, but also our facial muscles and all sorts of things connected to sound. It's a very useful survival mechanism. It's useful to play dead if a bear is attacking you. No use if you're going to primary school. So this design of our bodies for surviving as a hunter-gatherer don't work that well in a modern environment. Then the human ear is amazing. We have got detached inner ear bones, which means we can communicate in quite high frequencies, above the frequencies of our traditional predators. So the lion is roaring, and we can communicate at much higher frequency. Heck, there's a lion. That is a useful advantage, but those inner ears need to be really fluidly working. And if they lock up because the muscles and everything are tensed up, then it's going to lock up our voice as well. So the regulation of the inner ear muscle is critical for detecting human speech. And when people have got problems with speech and language, they've got problems with that inner ear muscle working. And that can be caused by trauma, that can be caused by infections, it could be all sorts of things that cause the sound not to work, so the voice doesn't work. And Tomatis's key message is that the voice only contains the harmonics that the ear can listen to. So if the ear can't process a sound, it's not coming out of the voice. So we've got this closing down system. And I know that seems like lots of little bits, but it's important. So our inner ear contains those two little muscles, which can get affected, as I said, by infections and so on. But it's also got our vestibular system that links to our motor skills and balance and postural control and orientation and so on. It links into our optic nerve. So if you've got sound processing problems, you've also got eye processing problems. If it also links to our facial nerve, so Porges would see social engagement as being the sound and the face. And of course, the full range of sound, music, speech, singing. So really important area of the anatomy that we hardly ever look at. Bing. So I want to look at some of the kinetic chain of development that could have led you to the point where you're in a hyper-alert state. When babies are born, they have a startle reflex, like this baby. And that's the Moro reflex. And ideally, when you crawl, you get rid of and integrate that reflex. You gain conscious control of your muscle system. If you don't integrate it, it keeps you hyper alert. So a lot of people I see have still got their Moro reflex, so they're very anxious all the time. They get their Moro reflex integrated, and then they say, do you know, I'm only stage fright. Do you know, I don't have that anxiety anymore. And when you do Moro reflex exercises to integrate it, you're doing a lot of work taking your head back, bringing your head forward. That helps the muscles in your neck strengthen, it helps the muscles in your neck relax and loosen the voice box. As they develop properly, you stop triggering hyper-alert behaviors. It is like switching off a switch to being anxious. It is very interesting. When you do the exercises, you must do them for at least 40 days diligently without breaks. So it is really, it's like going back to crawling. It's repeating exercises over and over until your body has total control of them. So it's really important. I can't emphasize enough. Every selective mute will have a problem with tomorrow. The other thing I see in all selective mutes, and certainly when I've gone through mountains of research and video clips, looking at my clients, looking at documentaries, is they've all got the retained asymmetric tonic neck reflex. And that is that because we're human, we can turn our head separate to our body. Other primates can't do that. When they want to go that way, the whole body moves. Whereas we can just have a look across. If we have integrated the asymmetric tonic neck reflex, if we haven't, then we find ourselves moving like a robot. If that isn't integrated, you get what's called overflow, and that can be around the mouth or it can be blinking of the eyes, but particularly around the mouth, you're locking up the jaw, you're doing a lot of odd movements around the jaw, a lot of jaw clamping, a lot of sticking the tongue out, a lot of tying up the shoulders. That is causing problems that seems to impact on anxiety and on the sound processing. So it appears to be the trapped nerves. When I'm screening for sound, if someone's got an asymmetric tonic neck reflex, I can see it in their sound curves. When I get that all relaxed and it's all working better, and there's no more clamping up of the jaw, the sound processing works better. So it's really important we don't put pressure on all these nerves in the head, around the jaw and the neck and the throat, because that's tightening up a system. It's causing us to be hyper alert. It's not giving us free movement of the vocal cords. It's just little things. Another thing I want to suggest to you that I think is really important is the symmetrical tonic neck reflex. This is when you're a baby and you're just learning to crawl, and imagine you're just learning to get your bottom off the floor, and that rocking forwards and the bottom comes up and it looks like they're going to start crawling, and then the bottom goes down again, and the bottom comes up and it looks like they're going to start crawling, and they go down again. They repeatedly make that movement until they learn to crawl. It's really important because it enables you to integrate the symmetrical tonic neck reflex. If you don't, it causes all sorts of problems, but the one I'm particularly worried about is the W sitting, because I think that impacts on postural control. So if we look, here's a selection of selective mutes taken from documentaries. My goodness, you can see the W sitting. That they're putting enormous pressure on their knee joints, they're putting enormous pressure on their hip joints, their hips can't possibly work properly with their spine. It completely destabilizes the whole frame of the human. Humans should not W sit. So we want them out of that, we want their legs turned properly, we want their feet and ankles to work properly, we want their hips to be in the right place with their thighs, and we want the spine really well positioned with the hips so they can sit upright. So if you're a double sitter, you can't get your spine in the right place, and we will see why that's important. I also think if you've been W sitting, you won't have got really good core strength. You won't have integrated another reflex called the tonic labyrinth reflex. So that really strong, powerful muscles that we have as a human that hold our body upright, which are really important for postural control. And remember, if we haven't got posture, we can't get our voice box right. So really important. So if we make a mess of our posture, we put out this really important area, the psoas muscle, and that links your hips, your spine, and your thighs. It's a really important area. The book I took this from talks about the link between Asian medicine, Indian medicine, and anxiety, and how it is well understood within Asian medicine that having this out of place causes people to be anxious. Getting it into a good place relaxes people. So it links in with Porges' long polyvagal theory that our whole body can be getting into quite a lot of anxiety. We develop postural control between 0 and 7 years of age. It's a very important period of development. So we ought to be integrating our primitive reflexes by 3.5, and then really building up that strength and developing really good postural control so that our feet arches can rise, our legs are in the right place with our hips are in the right place with our spine. The whole frame works properly, but we don't always, because lots can go wrong. And so if we look at the nervous system, it is all down the spine. So if the spine is in an odd position, we can be trapping nerves and triggering problems with absolutely everything. It is really important to get the spine in the right place if you want to be feeling in a comfortable place. Not just sitting upright and looking pretty, there's a lot more going on. And getting people out of a hyper alert state so they can digest food properly, so that they don't get inflamed organs, they don't cause their heart rate to be erratic, so the body works calmly and coherently. Really important. So this is the back view of one of my selective mutes from the documentary, and you can see what we've got is running forward, the bottom is sticking back, they've gone forward on their shoulders, and they've got a rolling gait. It's not good posture, that's going to cause a lot of pain and damage later on in life. So nobody needs to be in that state. We need to get the good postural control because we want to get the throat to relax. Next issue, breathing. So if people aren't breathing really well and really rhythmically through their nose, what can happen is that they get very shallow breathing. And modern diet can cause people to have much narrower pathways through their heads, particularly Westerners, and that restricts their breathing. You can learn to breathe through your nose. We need to. And it's so important for health that it ought to be taught. So if we move on, we can have a look at the impact. So what can happen, and I've seen happen in selective mutes, all of them, that they have very rapid panicked breathing. They're not really slow, deep breathing. It's not their default. There's because they're in a hyperalert state. When you do that, it purges the body of carbon dioxide. Seems like a good thing, but it isn't. You actually need a bit of carbon dioxide to help the body absorb oxygen, but it makes the person feel like they're suffocating. That can cause all sorts of other problems like waking dreams, like a complete close down, where you don't just be, you're not just a selective mute, you actually freeze. You can't go from A to B. You're absolute close down. So it's really important to understand that really deep rhythmic breathing is important for everybody to master, to the point that it doesn't matter what state they're in, they can come back to deep rhythmic breathing. And that ought to be taught to everybody before they're in a tragic state. But it's something we ought to look at for people with PTSD, people who are having hallucinations, etc. Is it the breathing that is causing the problem? And it would be so much cheaper if we looked at that. So, and it's certainly a problem for selective mutes. So, way to solve it is simply 5, a count of 5, breathing out, count of 5, breathing in through your nose, and that calms the body down. Once the body calms down, it can rest and digest. And if you practice that over days and weeks, what can happen is the person's digestive system works better, the person relaxes, the person starts going to the toilet and things more frequently. They just generally are a happier, more functioning body. And you don't want to keep somebody in a hyper-alert state. It's not good for anyone's health. Sound processing is a further thing you have to look at, because if you've got poor breathing and posture, it can lead to inner ear infections. So 80% of under 3s, the little curled up things, they are prone to ear infection. Some of that can be very bad, as in the case of this client, and that really affects their speech because their inner ear isn't working, so their speech can't work. We sort out their inner ear, lo and behold, their speech improves. Conversely, you can have problems with things like poor development. Sound issues block development. So if you're born with a sound issue, it will block the development. And if you have a big trauma, it can affect your speech. So I was talking to somebody about Maya Angelou at having a period of 3 years where she stopped speaking. And I said to the person, I thought that Maya Angelou must have had other issues with retained primitive reflexes, etc., before she also had a trauma. And so delays in development plus the trauma, stop speaking, and takes her years to get out of it. Really important. But sound processing, what's nice about it is you can agitate the inner ear and you can move the sound curves, and that changes things. So Tomatis's work was absolutely revolutionary in the 50s, 60s, 70s. In Britain it still is. But Porges identified that elements of music therapy can move the biobehavioral processes. It relaxes the long polyvagal nerve. It enables, because you're agitating the inner ear, it enables global systems to start working better. So sound can shake off the trauma held by the sound processing system. It can shake off some of the effects of inner ear infection. So the person can have really good sound processing and therefore can speak. Really useful. If you're working with somebody who's selective mute, my honest advice would be you need to get a Tomatis Infinite headset, but you need to work with a therapist to work with specialized music, because you're likely to have to tread carefully, not to traumatize the person, but also move those sound curves so they work. And it does take a certain amount of skill to do that, because getting someone out of such an extreme hyper alert state does take effort, time, patience, a team. So other factors are obvious things. The child is unsafe. There's a sense of danger, real or imagined. People were talking to me last week about the impact of Momo, a cartoon character who looks really quite unpleasant, causing children to become really traumatized. If you've got hyperalert adults, they will cause their children to be hyperalert, because everybody synchronizes the heart rates and breathing in a household. So if your heart rate's doing something terrible, the children's will be. Everybody gets into a hyperalert state. The way to control that is to make sure your own breathing and heart rate are working well, and so you are the dominant person that calms everything down. And really major events like the loss of a key carer, when a child loses a parent, it can be absolutely awful. Difficult births can traumatize a child, and you obviously don't know because they don't pop out and mention it. And significant life traumas. They're just pushing the system to the point where it seizes up. But there may well have been all these underlying issues as well before we even got there. So selective mutism is rarely going to be one factor. So it's best to go and approach through all the factors. So look at safety and sense of safety. Look at primitive reflexes, and on YouTube I have all of them. I've gone through explaining how to sort them out. Look at postural control and walking gait, and again on YouTube I have videos explaining how to sort it all out. Look at sound processing and sound therapy, and as I said, I think you ought to work with a sound therapist. Look at breathing and heart rate variance, and again on YouTube I have videos explaining how to sort that out. And be in tune with the family and social network. People need to be in tune because they want to, it's non-verbal support. And humans are pro-social animals. They need to be part of a tribe. So having that tribe in tune with their needs is really important. These are my contact details. I'm more than happy to chat to people, usually on Zoom. I'm more than happy to do full assessments of people. But most of all, I want you to be able to sort out issues around selective mutism, because it is so serious that we need to get it sorted as soon as possible. It should not roll through 1 year after another in schools, which I have seen happen too many times. These are the links to Tomatis, where you can pick up headphones and where you can find a Tomatis practitioner. Thank you for listening to me, and good luck. Bye bye.